look, it's and this isn't just law firms. I think a lot of businesses think that, when we're busy, we don't need to do marketing. Yeah. And when we're not busy enough, um, we should cut, or when we're not making enough money, we need to cut our marketing. And both are wrong. When you're busy, that's the time to do the marketing. And when you've not got enough money, that's the time to double down on your marketing, because actually, that's what's going to generate you the work.
Welcome to the Patcher Podcast, where we explore how law firms can harness data to drive smarter decisions. I'm Graham Moore, and today we have a fantastic guest, Dan Hodges, who's Marketing Director at Conscious Solutions. Dan has years of experience working with UK law firms to enhance their marketing strategies. We're going to dive deep today into one of the biggest challenges that we see in the industry, measuring return on investment in law firm marketing. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Graham.
So first of all, Dan, would you like to just explain to our listeners how you came to be where you are today, what your background is, how you came to be in law firm marketing?
I got into the professional services sector about 20 years ago, coming from a sales management background, and contacted a local firm a friend of mine had worked for. They were in not a very good financial position, and in my youth and arrogance said, I can sort your business out for you, and joined. It was a small conveyancing firm, turned it around, and then 11 years ago, after working in firms, running firms, had share in my own accountancy practice as well. I moved to sunny Wales, and I've known David, who runs Conscious, and we had a chat originally to see whether he knew anybody in the area, because my last business partner hadn't necessarily been as good as a good choice for me, and I ended up coming and joining Conscious. I started out as head of marketing, and today we're just over twice the size that we were when I joined the business. And I sit on the leadership team and look after everything client facing, really. So the account management team and the client services team.
So clearly, quite a lot of experience in marketing with law firms. On both sides, it's always a really good perspective to have as well. So let's start with the big question. Why is it so difficult to measure return on investment in law firm marketing?
I've got to be careful how I phrase this, but normally the biggest challenge that we see is the firms themselves, because they don't necessarily track the data internally, and that historically, I think, has been because solicitors and lawyers are very good at doing what they do in terms of the legal aspect of the work, but when it comes to actually running a business and understanding it, it's not necessarily the front of their skill set. And so we often find that they just don't record the data, and a lot of it is done on gut feel about how busy they are, rather than, oh, we know that we had X amount of phone calls, and that of those phone calls, 20% were new inquiries, etc. So that's the biggest reason, because they just don't track the data.
Yeah, if you haven't got the data, you haven't got a starting point at all.
Yeah.
And why do you think it is that they don't do that tracking?
They don't know. Some of them don't know what they don't know. For some, they want to do it, but they get resistance to it. I can remember in the early days of being part of Conscious, David coming back from a client meeting, explaining how we've been doing some work with them, and they had in their case management, practice management system, they had a drop down for where the work, where the work had come from, and still had, go back 10 years, but still had Yellow Pages in there. The business hadn't advertised in Yellow Pages for like 5 years previous, but people just selected it because it was the easiest one, and they don't necessarily one, they don't ask the question. Two, they do what they've always done. But unless you make it mandatory and you coach and train the people in the business that are responsible for inputting that information, it doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's a thing that we see so regularly. As you say, Yellow Pages, it's the first item on the list, so that's the one that gets chosen. Yeah.
Or other. But what's other? Well, it's just other. Did you ask? No.
Yeah, not particularly useful data like that. Yeah, so obviously, if you're trying to track conversions, trying to understand what's going on in your business, without that base data, that's a real challenge. What are some of the other hurdles that you see law firms face in linking their marketing activity to their revenue?
Having a budget, for starters. Some of them don't even have a budget, so they don't know how much they've spent, or whether they've got enough money to spend. I think there are that many tools available, and digital's always been so easy to be able to get the information. You can find out how many visits you've had to your website. You can find out you can then find out how many conversions that's generated, whether it be phone calls, whether it be form fills, etc. And every single firm that we work with has that set up on the on their website. But it's then getting that information in the other side, recording that information, and then doing something with it. And I don't think it's anything. I don't think it's anything more sinister than that. I think it's just the fact that detailing that, recording it, and then reviewing it, and taking the time to do it, having the time to do it, because solicitors are often very busy doing the doing. So I don't think there's anything necessarily bigger than that, because once you've got those numbers, you can start. It's not difficult to work out what your return is, but it's actually recording the data. That is the one and only real problem that we have.
As you say, a lot of firms will have that data on the digital side. Do you find that they make enough use of that when they have the data?
No, we've worked with firms of all sizes, and it's not, it doesn't relate to how big or small a firm is. It's more about how. If I go back 20 years when I first got into the legal sector, solicitors and law firms were very much like, look, people come to us because they need our services. Now it's a lot different, because people go looking for answers to their questions and then find somebody that is either telling them what they want to hear, or they like the way that people are answering their questions, so they make contact. So it's changed. The way people buy and consume legal services is very different. Well, what hasn't changed a lot is there is an aging senior partner owner of law firms that still haven't sort of caught up. And don't get me wrong, there are people coming through now that have both that business hat and the lawyer hat, but that just takes time to change. It's an evolution. So it's a lot to do with the people behind the business, rather than and that's not. I'm sure that they want to know about it. It's sometimes they just don't know that this stuff's available.
Yeah, I can see that. So there's a lot of challenges there, but in the time that you've been in the sector, you must have come across some more positive examples. Can you talk through a real world example where a law firm struggled with measuring their marketing ROI, and then how they actually overcame it, the steps they took?
Yes, we worked with a firm. They wanted to niche off one of their or some of their services into its own separate site, and which we did. And with that, we put in call tracking, and all the website analytics that are available, Google Analytics for Universal Analytics at the time, and Search Console, call tracking, and form tracking as well. And we used that data. We reported on that monthly, But at the same time as that, we also got them to record how many new cases they got as a result of the work that came from the inquiries, which then allowed them year on year to be able to grow their budgets so that they could, because they could prove to the partnership that it was worth it. Because look, we spent this and we got this, so if we spend that, we can hopefully get this. So that's and that's the reality. It is that simple. If you're going to do it, it's the time. It's like anything, setting it up and then spending the time, prioritizing, spending the time, reviewing those numbers at the end of it. But it doesn't have to be complicated.
So you'll have seen a lot of different firms, a lot of different marketing teams and marketing approaches. You'll have seen the sort of comparison of how successful some are against others. The firms themselves will be interested potentially in benchmarking their success, how they're doing compared to the industry. But what's the best way for law firms to do that, to actually understand how successful they're being with their marketing?
Because every firm is different. At a really high level, I suppose you can benchmark yourself against your competition. And from how successful is your marketing? If it's from a digital perspective, how successful is it? Well, go and search for the types of services that you want people to buy and see whether your website appears. And if it does, then you're obviously doing something right. But I think, success, it depends how you're framing success, Graham, because to start with, it's where are we today? So where are you today as a firm? Well, last year we brought in 1,000 new matter starts. And this year we want to grow by 10%, 20%, pick your number and measure your success against that. Because I think when you start to try and do it against your competition, you can't necessarily fully understand what they're doing and understand them. So you're better off measuring success by your own metrics based on what your goals are as a business. And that in itself then holds a problem, because how many firms actually have a strategic plan and this is what we want to do? I've had a conversation with a firm in the last month that have got a very clear goal in mind. And the question that I asked them was, by when do you want to achieve it? And the answer was, whenever we get there. So, a target, a goal without a date really is just, it's not, because without that saying, right, I want to do this by that day, and the thing is, it's okay if you don't achieve it, but at least you're shooting for something by a specific time. And if you don't get there, you'll still be closer when you get to that date than you were when you decided that that's what you wanted to achieve. Yeah. So so it's not just, I think from an overall perspective, it's not just about marketing is a tool to use. I think marketing is becoming even more important in terms of the decisions that firms make and business in general makes about how you do business. But it's all got to come from an even higher level than that, and that's a strategic business plan about where you want to go, what you want to achieve, and then use the different tools and resources around you to know whether you get there, and benchmark yourself against yourself to start with.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And sort of brings to mind something like a target without a date is just a dream, or something like that. But yeah, I think some really good advice there. Against yourself and your own objectives. And one of the conversations we regularly have with our customers, it's not just about on the marketing side, on the finance side as well. It's exactly the same. You've got to know where you want to get to in order to set the appropriate KPIs and measure against those.
Yeah, because on one level, it doesn't does it matter? For vanity, it does matter whether you're doing better than your competition or not. But actually, it makes no difference, because everybody, every firm is different.
Yeah, exactly. So, sort of following on from that, then, thinking about using data to make decisions. Lots of firms rely on gut feel rather than data when making marketing decisions. How would you suggest firms should start shifting towards a more data-driven approach?
I think you just got to start with the big numbers. So you can be as simple as how many. So use the tools that are available. They don't cost you anything. So Google Analytics, how many visitors am I getting to my website? There's one metric. As a result of that, how many inquiries are we then generating? Second metric. And as a result of that, how many new cases are we opening? That's another metric. Now, if you can track source of business, great. But so we work with one firm that just says, right, we spend X on marketing, our website generates Y, and as a result of that, we get this many inquiries and we open this many new cases every month. And we know that there's a direct correlation between the amount of money that we spend and the amount of new cases that we start. And they don't even go into the detail of, well, some of that's referral work, some of that's from the internet, some of that's from people walking in off the streets, just at that really high level. And then they divide the amount that they spend by the number of new matters that they open. If there was a big, a big referral of new matters, they would take that out of the mix, but every day single matters. And then they say, right, so it costs us £100 for every new, it costs £100 in marketing for every new case. So next year, if we want to get more, we need to do, how many more do we want? It's 100 times the number of additional new matters we want to get. And that's at a really basic level where they start. And they've got so many more numbers available to them, but they haven't got the time or they don't want to take the time to dive into it. So they just work at that really high level.
But that is a start, as you say.
Absolutely.
And you're working with factual data. It's one of those things I think firms can often get hung up with the complexity of, you mentioned attribution there, and attribution in marketing anywhere is always a real challenge. But just because you can't get 100% correct attribution doesn't mean you can't do any sort of data-driven analysis. And as you say, you can just ignore it altogether and still get some really useful and actionable information. You mentioned Google Analytics. Any other tools and technologies, that you think law firms should be using that you would recommend to help them track their data for marketing better?
So Google Analytics is free, and so I would tie that in with Google Tag Manager, which allows you to be able to create events and create markers about where you want to track activity, depending on how sophisticated you want to be. And there's a level above Google Analytics, which is called Google Search Console, which looks at traffic to your website, regardless of cookies, because it doesn't do any tracking of stuff, people, visits. And then you move into things like call tracking, which is there's a number of providers out there, but they put a bit of code over your telephone number, and it gives every visitor a unique telephone number, and then you can track it back. And if you're doing any AdWords or Google paid search or anything like that, you can then start to understand in detail what keywords generated that. A spreadsheet for recording your own numbers. Back in the day when I was in a law firm, just getting people to type up the inquiries in a spread, or type up the incoming calls on a spreadsheet rather than handwritten. Just doing that, at least you can then start to interrogate that data. And if you want to use a simple reporting tool, because you can to pull that data in, so you just look at the things you want to, you can use something called Google Looker Studio. But that's what I'd use to get started with.
Yes, good advice there. Thanks. So moving on to the actual metrics, what would you say were the top 3 metrics law firms should be prioritizing to assess their effectiveness?
For me, from a digital perspective, it's how many visitors you're getting to your website, how many inquiries is that generating, how many new matters are you opening?
Yeah, simple and easy.
Yeah.
Good. So moving on, looking beyond just return on investment, how would you say you see the role of marketing evolving in UK law firms over, say, the next 3 to 5 years?
I think with artificial intelligence, and the speed at which that seems to be coming into our lives, that marketing, whereas we went through a time where we had offline. When I started with Conscious, we talked about offline marketing, online marketing. Then it became, well, it's digital marketing. Then now we're talking about marketing, really, and I think that we're starting to blur the gap between all types of touch points with people, and it's about firms starting to properly present themselves to the world and to their target audience with every touch point. So it's not just about, should I run a paid search campaign? Should I do some social media? It's about this whole brand evolution and the brand that you are, and the way that your team and your fee earners and your support staff and everybody in the business is talking to people, because I think it becomes a truly holistic proposition in terms of the way the part that marketing plays in the business. And I don't think you can just don't think you can just have a good website, or just have good social media, or just have some good Google reviews or some other reviews on different platforms. I think you've got to do it all, even to the point where I've never been a champion of things like the Legal 500 and Chambers directories, but I think because of the way that AI and search results are going, and the fact that AI goes and looks for information about to answer people's questions, and it's looking for citations and reasons to put results or put answers in front of people from other firms. I think those type of industry specific awards are going to become more important for firms, as well as reviews, good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it's a much more holistic approach. That's presumably going to change the role of the individuals working within law firm marketing, the responsibilities, the things they need to think about.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think it does. I think it changes the whole culture of a law firm, because you can't liken it to a restaurant. If you go to a restaurant and you have a really good experience, you'll tell 1 or 2 people. If you don't have a really good experience, you'll probably tell 10 or 20 people. So if I go to a law firm, then I'm going to talk about it. But I don't think it can be siloed anymore, and the future definitely isn't siloed. I think it's about how you're communicating on an everyday basis, because there's just so much information out there and so many different places to get answers from, that you almost need to be, every touch point needs to be relevant or correct, or not correct from the way that you want to present yourself to the world.
Yeah, there's that consistency of communication, whatever the channel is. I think it's so important. So you sort of touched on the impact of AI there. How much do you think law firms are adopting AI at the moment? How effectively are they doing that, or are you still seeing resistance?
I think that there's a real mix, and from a doing their legal work perspective, we probably don't get in and involved in a business enough to be able to see whether they're using it in their day-to-day roles and work. I know that some are, but to what extent, not really close enough to them from that perspective. From using it for their marketing, it's a real mixed bag. Some will use it for their social media, some will use it for, got a couple of clients that have used it to write their content for their websites. not saying that it's the best thing to do, because I think while you can use it to do some of the heavy lifting, it's not good enough today to just spin up a piece of content using AI and then chuck it on your website. It'll probably do more harm than good. I think there are ways to. Oh no! So the expectation that we're seeing from firms is that the use of AI should allow people to get more for the same amount, which is what we're trying to do with our internal processes and systems. But I don't think it will be this holy grail of replacing people.
Yeah, there's obviously lots of conflicting views and lots of fears and opportunities around all of that. And it's fascinating the actually is to see how that unfolds.
I don't know that it'll take a few years. I think it's moving at a pace that, I think if we have this conversation in 12 months' time, it'd be interesting. Let's put a date in the diary for that.
Yeah, okay. Sounds like a plan. So what would you say is one common mistake that law firms make in their marketing strategy? Something that you wish they would stop doing?
Stop doing or start doing?
Let's go with stop doing.
Stop thinking marketing is the least important thing in the business.
Yeah, that's something that you come across regularly, is it?
Look, and this isn't just law firms. I think a lot of businesses think that, when we're busy, we don't need to do marketing. Yeah. And when we're not busy enough, we should cut, or when we're not making enough money, we need to cut our marketing. And both are wrong. When you're busy, that's the time to do the marketing. And when you've not got enough money, that's the time to double down on your marketing, because actually, that's what's going to generate you the work. Yeah. And I think that's about linking your marketing to your overall business strategy. Because if you do that, you can then properly start to see what impact that'll have on the business.
Yeah, sound advice. So, yeah, this has been fascinating, Dan. Before we wrap up, where can our listeners connect with you? Where can they learn more about Conscious Solutions?
So our website, www.conscious.co.uk. You can drop me an email. My email's really easy, dan@conscious.co.uk. LinkedIn, obviously. We are an active part of the Law Firm Marketing Club, which is our sister brand. And I think for anybody that is in the marketing space or wants to start thinking about or doing more with their marketing, that the Law Firm Marketing Club is a really good place to go to and find out more about, because it's a community of law firm marketeers and partners that do marketing. And it's almost one of those safe spaces where you can go and ask the questions that you don't necessarily want to ask. And then there's also a page on our website where it tells you where we are. So we update it fairly regularly, but we're all over the place at different events.
Okay, yeah, that's all useful. And yeah, on the Law Firm Marketing Club, I think I'd second that from what I've seen and what I've heard. Yeah, great space for law firm marketers to get together and share good practice and really learn. So one final question then, before we wrap up. If you could give law firm marketers just one piece of advice to improve their marketing measurement today, what would that be?
Know your numbers. It doesn't have to be complicated. Like we said earlier about just 3 metrics, but know your numbers and start.
Yeah, good sound advice. Keep it simple and start with those numbers. So yeah, Dan, thanks so much for your time today. And to our listeners, if you found this episode valuable, don't forget to subscribe and share it with your network. So until then, take care.
Thanks, Graham.